Yacht Asia Taylor Begay in Asia, Ayakiniat said the ne, Yunslon Petani, Bashashin, Ashe Dashache, Trapahan, Dashanella, Seth the cheat des aha, det nasha. For all my non-Denebazad speakers, I was merely introducing myself. I said, hello, my name is Taylor Begay. I belong to these 4 clan groups and I reside in Red Mesa, Utah. I belong to the Dene Nation, federally recognized as Navajo from the Four Corners region. Well, it's important to learn about Indigenous peoples because you do better when you know better. And currently in this climate, a lot of Indigenous peoples' history knowledge is not being passed, and Indigenous peoples are being overlooked at or are not being acknowledged at all, to the point where it's reaching negative effects as for Indigenous peoples. So the fact that we are able to educate the non-Indigenous world that we as Indigenous peoples are still living, we're still breathing, and that we are still here on our original homelands and still doing what we love, which is singing, dancing, living our Indigenous life, utilizing our own original practices and culture and identity. And the fact that we get to share it and educate each and every single person that we can, whoever utilizes this knowledge, is a beautiful thing. And that's why it's important to learn about Indigenous peoples and the land that you're on, because it's somebody else's home. Terminology is very important because the way we utilize and the way we enunciate certain words or use words in our vocabulary has an effect. Everything is interconnected with one another. And the reason why I say Indigenous peoples and I encourage the usage of Indigenous peoples when talking about Native people, First Nations peoples, or Indigenous peoples is because we are Indigenous or Native to these lands. Whether you're Indigenous to America, Native to America, or your First Nations and you're Indigenous to Canada, so on and so forth, the fact that you use the correct words that correctly, respectfully identifies a group of people goes such a long ways. Because when you use negative words such as Indian, other incorrect, insensitive terms to identify Indigenous peoples, it has its own effect that trickles on down to the littlest thing. So being able to use the correct pronunciation and using the correct words helps out in the long run for Indigenous peoples. The fact that Indigenous peoples are seen as something that you only can read about, see about in the history books, the documentaries, is a military tactic. And the US government has openly come out and state that it was an assimilation process to where we eliminate the Indigenous peoples and their identity and their culture to where they can assimilate into the non-Indigenous world and non-Indigenous society. But me standing here and presenting myself the way that I do and the way that I walk and talk and many other Indigenous youth goes to show that we as Indigenous peoples are still here and that we are still living and breathing with the knowledge that we carry since time immemorial. And my response is to learn more about Indigenous peoples, learn about the areas that you are in, because who knows, that region that you're currently in, you go to school, you live, you work, what have you, that may have belonged to a nation once upon a time ago, which still does. Everything's still there, but it just takes a new form now. So there are over 100 federally recognized Indigenous tribes. That's not including the thousands that are unrecognized by the different government entities, whether that's in Canada, the United States, South America, or Mexico, or any other piece of land. We all have our own diverse language. We all have our own diverse culture, ways of living, ways of doing things, and ways of identity. And the fact that the non-Indigenous world kind of conglomerates us and puts us all together in one has its own negative effects. And as Indigenous peoples, we are trying to stay away from that conglomerate that we've been put in, sadly, by showcasing our own identity, by practicing our own language, and by living our own culture. So I am fortunate enough to grow up with a lot of knowledge keepers in my Dene cultural ways. And I, again, was fortunate enough to be brought into this powwow way, this powwow circuit way, where other nations have addressed me as relative, as grandson, nephew, little brother, son, all these different titles because I live and breathe this culture. I live and breathe my own culture, and I continue by doing performances, by doing demonstrations, by going to my own ceremonies, by going to other ceremonies when I'm invited, or just even speaking my own language. My little introduction has so much history and has so much meaning behind it. And even me wearing my hair this certain way has story and has teachings behind it from other nations, and including my own nation. And just it all ties in, and there's so many other intricate parts. It's mind-blowing, it's crazy, but it's also an honor and a privilege, the fact that Indigenous peoples are the living, breathing history book, so to speak, because we carry so much, and everything that we do can be traced back to the very beginning and can even be forward. And we continue utilizing our own ways and our own teachings to this very point to lead us into a better future. So this regalia that I'm currently wearing, and the term is regalia, the reason why I say this is because throughout my travels and throughout my time as a performer, as a dancer, as an educator of sorts, different individuals have said outfit, have said costume. And the term costume is a negative term because when you think costume, you think Halloween, you think all these other things, and it takes away the severity of these items. It takes away the severity of this regalia. Everything that I wear has been handmade. Everything that I wear has a meaning behind it. The symbols, the colors, the shapes, even these feathers. These are original eagle feathers, black and whites, golden, different hawk varieties, different hawk species. Even my shield is has a different skin, and so is these armbands. And this regalia that I'm wearing comes from the Omaha people. It belongs to the Hlushka society, which translates to warrior people, the warrior society. And these dances were originally done by the warrior people. That doesn't mean that you have to have served in the armed forces. That does not mean you've had to face the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. As times have changed, as Indigenous peoples, we recognize the evolution, and so we evolved with the times, we adapted, and to now where I, as a young man, am seen not only by my people, but other nations across the US and Canada as a young warrior. So that gives me the right to wear and to present and to speak to you guys about this and what it means and what it signifies, because now the battlefield is no longer hand to hand. Now the battlefield is our workforce, it's our education, it's all these different things. It's just taken on a new shape, a new form, but the meanings is all still there. The reason why I educate and continue to push on education is because, once again, you do better when you know better. And thankfully enough, we have so much information at the accessibility at our fingertips right here, right now. And the reason why I push education and I push learning about Indigenous peoples is because Indigenous peoples have been put to the side, and now are we finally being seen? Now are we finally being recognized? So we want to promote, we want to push, and we want to encourage Indigenous identity, because not only is this going to help the parents, but it's also going to help the youth. And our youth, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, are our future. And our future, we want them to have all the tools. We want them to have all the knowledge that they need to live a better future, to live a better tomorrow. So that way they can do better than we did right now. Everything that we do is not just for us. It's for the future generation on down. It's for what's going to happen down the line. Is my relative down the line going to know this? Is my relative down the line going to know how to speak? Is my relative down the line going to know how to present themselves? And that is why we do this, and that is why we value and we hold these items, these teachings, to such a high pedestal. So I encourage you to ask questions, because you're not going to know unless you've been told. And as Indigenous peoples, we don't want to share this information with you for you to just take it and shape it however you see fit, because that is not the correct way. I'm telling you exactly what has been shared and what has been told to me. So I encourage you to take this knowledge and do with it how you please, in a respectful manner. as I am entrusting you with this knowledge, because there's been times where I've shared something and some way, somehow it comes back to me and so has to say something about it. So it is also a reflection upon me as an educator, as a young knowledge keeper. My final thought, and what I will leave you with, is don't be shy. Don't be shy. Ask questions, and to also learn as much as you can. All this information is for you. Everything that you want to do is right here at your fingertips. So take advantage of all of it. Take advantage of every opportunity that is open to you, and live a good life.